Welcome to the new season of the Live Your Spa Life show. The SPA in Spa Life stands for Seek Power Always, that divine power within you to do what you're here to do. The theme for this season is intentional living. Amazing people like you share ways to live by design and with purpose to ensure that this short ride of life occurs with choice, physically, financially, spiritually, and in your relationships to create a world-class life. In these times of uncertainty, it's time for you to move past the distractions and start trusting yourself more through your God-giving knowingness. No one truly knows better what's best for you than you. In this season, you'll have plenty of examples of people choosing their best life and creating a positive impact through intentional living. Thank you for sharing your precious time with us and being part of the Live Your Spa Life conversation. With us today is Torrin Minutillo, a seasoned business veteran proven under fire. Torrin's 34 business journey has started in a time before mobile phones and internet instant communication. A lot of people have like a whole career of 34 years, and when you can break it down into the seasons, it really gets juicy. So the journey was riddled with many highs and lows in the first 20 years before he cracked the code and now enjoys a business life that seemed impossible at one point. The turning point was driven by getting a deep understanding of the human experience and applying it to the business experience. That real-life education has prepared him well for what he is passionate about doing now, which is helping other business owners on their journey to conquer their dreams. Empowering achievement with courage. Torrin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Diane. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the lovely intro.
Absolutely. Well, I'd love to start with, how was your first 20 years in business, really different than how you're operating today?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, in the first 20 years, not obviously, but I started young, 24 years old, to get into business myself. And I think it was just really a place of uncertainty. I didn't really know what I was expected. I didn't do any college, or I didn't go to school to learn actually how to be a business owner. I sort of fell into it, and it was very much an intuitive process of just, follow the next pathway. And then when I look back now, obviously, as on reflection, it was one of bit restlessness of wanting to find something that I could get my teeth into that I felt was going to be the thing. So it was probably, followed what a lot of business owners do, and they follow that shiny object syndrome, looking for the thing that's going to be better than what you already got. And I think I spent a fair bit of time just following that. Now, look, I got some successes along the way, and there were some good things, but I didn't have the solid foundation. And that's what I understood on reflection when I did shift things around, is not having a solid foundation means you're susceptible to when things get tough. And now, as I teach other business owners in their journey, is building a solid foundation to whatever it is you're doing is going to hold you up in the times of when things get tough, and as we've seen over the last few years, there's always something around the corner that you can't expect, which is outside your control. But then there's a whole lot of bunch of stuff that are inside your control, and without you having a good solid foundation, it things may fall over. And the metaphor I use, like if you think about the longest standing buildings that we know is the pyramids, and they've got a massive foundation with a pointy end at the top. And that's how we should build our business life, with a constant building of that foundation. And so the difference between where I was in the first 20 years to sort of since then is probably that realization and that moving towards just building a solid foundation. And of course, this is a good metaphor for life as well, is that you keep building yourself as a solid foundation, and you're going to be able to withstand the challenges that come towards you, and hopefully thrive in whatever it is that you've chosen to do in your field of endeavor. So I think that's two distinctions. Hopefully that answers the question between
where absolutely.
I was.
No, excellent. Well, especially like the last, let's say, 3 years, it's been The world has changed as we've known it in a lot of different ways. I think if anybody was predicting things in the world, I mean, some people would say, they were fearful, there was chaos, there was a lot of division, things happening. So, in business in general, there can be things that can be unpredictable or fearful. And I love your approach in looking at fear as far as looking at what's beneath and below that fear. I'd love for you to speak a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, I think, look, I think as you mentioned in the intro, is that I've spent a fair bit of time, approximately 11 odd years now since the global financial crisis, when I went through my sort of period of uncertainty in my life and then have rebuilt everything. So through that, what I've learned through that journey of understanding human behavior is that, fear dominates a lot of things that we do because our nervous system is actually built to keep us safe. That's what we've evolved to become. And therefore, we have a negative bias in things that we do. In fact, science sort of tells us that we've got roughly a 10-to-1 negative bias, which is a lot. So we're facing that all the time in all the decisions that we're making. So I think when you look at, the fear of making a move or doing something in business, it's not actually that move, it's the consequences of that move that you're fearing. And so when you get below the surface of what actually is really driving this fear, you maybe have a better chance of, dealing with it or having some tools to potentially move through that process. So, and again, just to add into that, one of the methods that I teach now is about where courage plays a part in all this. And anybody who's out there listening to this, and certainly my journey, I'm sure, Diane, you can reflect on this as well, is that whenever you've had to push through some challenge or barrier that you've had to overcome, it's been the courage that has actually created the energy for you to push through that. And so courage plays a huge part. And it's fear, the antidote to fear is courage, is to push through whatever thing. So I suppose what I wanted to get the message here is that having a negative bias is already built into our nervous system and the way our system operates. So we've got to find a way of knowing that's going to happen. You're going to get those emotions, those feelings, that comes up as fear. But what's your process to understand what actually is the challenge? And then what's the courage and the process that you need to move through it? And if you can figure that part out, then that's going to help you out, because it's not like you're never going to have fear. Because the nervous system, the feeling, we can't control those things. What we can control is the response to the fear and move forward through it. So yeah, I think it's just about breaking it down or deconstructing what is the actual challenge, and then cognitively working out a process that helps you work through that. So yeah, that's how I would tackle fear, particularly in business.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that any of us who've been entrepreneurs for, decades, right? There's ups and downs in businesses. And, you mentioned the global financial crisis. A lot of businesses were taken out during that time. What do you think helped you have that stability to be able to move through that and get to the other side and still be in business?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, look, it comes down to, so I think if we sort of think about courage and break it down to where does it show up in all sorts of different ways, things like just having resilience or having determination to push through, having a bigger reason why outside of who you are to maybe push through. And certainly for me in the global financial crisis, I felt, one of my core values is around my family and my kids, my wife, and our family unit, and that's sort of been part of my values. So for me, individually, is providing for them more so than for me was the thing that drove me to push through and to stay disciplined to the things that I needed to do. Now, my challenges were that, from a structural perspective, or who I was as a business owner and how I was achieving that, needed to be evolved. But my determination to push through, which required courage, because there were certainly days where you thought, I don't really want to do this anymore, this is getting too hard. But it comes back to, emotions are driving everything that we do, and how we respond to those emotions, or how we are feeling about where we're at, is what's going to, then you require some discipline to push through and actually do the activity. So, I think for me, through that global financial crisis, and it was it wasn't a week or two, it was a 3-year period. It was from 2008 right through to 2011, where I was doing a lot of soul searching, is what shifted me to figure out that everything external of me wasn't the answer. It was all internal of me, how I was perceiving my situation, how I was dealing with the current, where was I going to go, what was my vision, how was I going to provide for my family, all these things. And I suppose the thing for me in the end, Diane, was that when I took responsibility for how I got to wherever I got, was the thing that shifted me in the direction of going, if I take responsibility, now I'm in control of everything, as opposed to what a lot of people do, and I certainly did, is you shift that control outside of who you are. So therefore you're relying on external factors to take you where you need to go. So I think we're probably going down a couple of different things here, but hopefully that sort of gives you context to how I push through and what we need. And I think, answer your question, is that the people who thrived through that period, or the ones that I've observed as well, was one that took control of their own situation, and the ones that didn't go so well, or are the ones that were like looking for external help continuously, and basically what we would call external locus of control. So they didn't have their own control. In their mindset was, someone else has got to help me fix this, versus me taking control and fixing it myself.
Right, right. I think sometimes we forget this, the personal responsibility, right? That whole, if it's to be, it's up to me. But a lot of times that is, driven by, activity and what's happening around. But, a lot of times people don't look about, updating our own internal hardware so that we are up leveling, right? It says, was it new level, new devil, right? There's different things that come up, as you're going along. And so one of the things, in the title of our podcast, in Seek Power Always, the SPAlife, the SPA, is really relying on that internal power, that knowingness, that intuition that really leads us in those directions. And one of the things you've talked about is that maturing self-awareness. How has that evolved for you over time? And do you have some clear indicators now where you know when to pivot, you know what you're shifting, you know that you're in your right lane?
Yeah, I mean, what I've come to understand, Diane, is that self-awareness is probably the number one skill, and it's one that we continuously need to evolve. Because what I've found, or certainly for me and how I help other people now, is that when you become self-aware about, what's driving you, how you're reacting to that, so you're essentially figuring out your own human condition. When you understand more about yourself, it helps you understand the people around you much better, which helps you then connect with those people. And what we know is, certainly in business and to thrive anywhere in life, is that you can't do this on your own. So you've got to connect with the right people. So this is a slippery slope back from, the more you become self-aware of yourself, the more you understand the people around you. And that connection helps you move forward to get what it is that you say you want in your life. And so for me, I focus on that pretty much daily, is how can I improve myself? How do I get the best out of what I'm doing? How do I stay present to the moment? Why do I feel the way I feel? Become really sort of aware of that. And then that helps me, the more I understand that, the more I understand the people around me and how I can respond to them to be able to move forward collectively. So I think self-awareness becomes, one of those foundational things that I was talking about earlier, is what shifted me from where I was to where I am now. It's one of those things you can keep on working on, and also one that is a never-ending process, right? So you can always learn how to be more self-aware and understand what's impacting you and why you're making the decisions you are, why you're reacting the way you are. And so, yes, I think so. Self-awareness really is one of the pillars of how to improve ourselves to get what it is that we want in our world.
Right. Well, and that's the beauty of, having coaches around us and consultants and people that can see the blind spots that we're not seeing. One of my favorite quotes is by Les Brown, where it's like, you can't see the big picture when you're in the frame. Right. And so, we can discover things within ourselves, but then, it's also nice to have eyes outside. That's part of our team and the people that support us in that. Torrin, you mentioned that one of the turning points that you had was being able to have better understanding of the human experience and applying that to business. What does that look like?
Yeah, well, I think for me, so my focus about understanding more about the human condition, and has come about by the fact that the more I've learned about the human experience, and because there's patterns, we haven't got a lot of time today to go deep into that sort of neurobiology, if you like, of humans, how we're constructed, but there's some core things that are the same within us. It's how they interplay, which impacts who we are and how we show up in the world. The correlation is that a lot of my experience in the business journey is that a lot of coaches in particular, or a lot of people, tend to separate business with who you are as a human. So one of the things that I found that worked well for me is the more I connected the human experience with the business experience and realized that really business is just an expression of the human experience, as like any other field of endeavor, going to business, being an entrepreneur. So at the core of it, who you are as a human is going to be the reason why you take the actions and the activity you do in business, which therefore gives you your results, because your results are an outcome of what you do on a day-to-day basis. So for me, connecting the human experience with the business experience through that framework of, well, business is just an expression of the human experience, we need to understand what is it that is driving us humans to do what we do and what we don't do that we think we should do. So everybody's got a vision or a goal or what they want to achieve, but yet the way they behave doesn't always deliver that. So what I've come to understand is part of the human experience is that if we did everything we thought was right, we would get the results that we want. But the problem happens is that our neurobiology, how our bodies are reacting, our mind, our everything to do with our physiology, is dictating how we feel, is being dictated by how we feel, and therefore we actually respond to that, not necessarily our cognitive process. So the human experience is one to understand for me, and to help people I help, is that, and I explain it in the way that emotions is actually driving everything. We have an emotional system, we have a thinking system, we have a doing system. And we all believe, or most of us believe, that it's our thinking system that is driving everything, but that is just responding to the emotional system. So when we can respond better to the emotional system and understand that this is underpinning everything we do, we have a better way of then implementing that into our business world to get the results we want. So there's a couple of lines there to connect, but the main one around the connection between the human experience and the business experience is that emotions are driving everything that we do, how we feel. And it's for people who are hearing that for the first time, that's a little bit challenge for them to take that on board. Because we sort of say, I'm a intellectual thinker, I'm not an emotional thinker. Well, the reason you're an intellectual thinker is driven by how you're feeling, which is an emotion. Right? The reason why you become such a left brain orientated, which is often described, is because of how you're feeling that makes you safe. That's responding to your neurobiology, which is the reason you are that way. It's not that you're a left and you're a right. It's the reason you're responding to that because of how you feel. So yeah, and I think so. This is all part of the human experience and the human condition. And if we can understand that and implement that into our business world, which is what I like to show people how to do, that's going to give you the impact, because now you're responding to your behaviors versus what you think you want. So the question I always ask is, why don't we get what we say we want? Right? So why don't we get what we say we want? Because we want a whole lot of things, but then our behaviors don't marry up to what we say we want. And this is the art of performance. This is the art of productivity. This is, what everything we want in business is productivity, because that's where we get paid. And that's how we thrive and move forward. But we don't always create the behaviors, or we take action on the behaviors of what we say we want. So unpacking all that is about understanding the human experience and why this happens in the first place. That's the deconstruction process. And then what's the reconstruction process to move forward and put it all together to move to whatever it is your goals want. So hopefully in that very short thing, I've been able to explain that well enough. Obviously, it's a challenge to explain that. So yeah, maybe I'll ask you, did that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, there's so much more research out there that that emotional intelligence is what drives us to people, that, the connection that we have with people, way more than just the straight up intellect, which is what, a lot of people were growing up with. But seeing those shifts and those changes and being able to go down those layers and be able to identify those emotions. I mean, usually if someone is stuck in business or life, there's an emotion tied to it, something you don't want to see. There's something that is there for us, right? And so that's why things like the emotional reel, being able to get, real versed in the different layers of emotion to be able to identify those. It's like they say that in order to have emotion, you have to be in motion, right? You have to be in movement to be able to access those type of things, and then be able to kind of reverse engineer that and see how it is that we're showing up in the world. And so I love that you're connecting and marrying that about the human experience, because if we look at, what are the things that trigger us? Are we responding? Are we reacting? Like, what are all the things? And it always comes down to that emotional connection. And when we can get clear on what those things are and be able to utilize that tool in business, it allows us to be better communicators. It allows us to help people and be able to see the missing components as far as what's going on for them. So it's a brilliant path for those who haven't, really explored. We are multifaceted beings, and we have to look at that mental, emotional, spiritual ways of that to be able to really thrive in the world.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that is that mentioned about self-awareness, and I think for me, as I've evolved as a person, as a human, let alone as a business owner, is that there's more and more, even today, so I'm sort of about 11 years into my personal development journey when it comes to understanding and studying human behavior. And that's sort of escalated as it's gone on, and I've become now, so the last 4.5 years, I've had a real estate company for the last 23 years, but the last 4 years I've devoted my time into helping other business owners, because I've arrived at a place that I'm comfortable I can do that. But the point being is that the more I've understood about how emotions drives everything, the better I've performed, the better I've understood myself, the better I've started understanding the people around me, and the better I can connect with them. And then the better you can connect with people, the better you're going to have activity in business and be able to actually achieve the things that you want. So it's all it's all connected. But the point I want to make is that, and for those who are listening, is to really explore how the emotions and how you are feeling is impacting everything you are doing, and not push it aside and trying to intellectualize everything. And I think for me, that's the in all areas of business and any endeavor. Like I know I'm as a business coach, or I'm helping business owners, I'm focusing that, but this is a human experience that relates to any field of endeavor in whatever you are. For me, I'm just narrowing it down is how do we use this to improve our business journey to get what it is that we want to get out of our business life. And I think there's not enough spoken about the connection between the human experience, which is all about this emotionally driven. And when you go right back to the neurobiology, it's because our nervous system is built to keep us safe. And there's this 10-to-1 negative bias that creates these, so go back to fear, you talked about fear. That's what that is. It's like, it's the brain's predicting that things are going to have a bad outcome to what is in front of us. So that creates a feeling, which creates an emotion, which then turns into fear. So when you deconstruct that, and in the moment can stop your brain, because the feeling will dissipate after a period of time if you let it go. It's only when you fuel it with more thought, with more rumination, with more, how is this going to get bad for me? And because your brain will go and find all the reasons why it will. It's a great predicting machine. So you've got to ask yourself a question. And so one of the tools I use to help people as a circuit breaker is to ask yourself a question. As soon as you ask yourself a question, why am I feeling this way? It stops the process, and you then start to deconstruct that. And what you'll probably realize, mostly 9 times out of 10, is that the fear that you're fearing isn't that real. And what it ultimately is that you're fearing the consequences of the outcome, not actually the consequences of what you're about to do or hoping to do, not the actual thing that you want to do. So it's when and those consequences are generally built by yourself based on how this is going to impact me, and you're more fearing that than actually the process of itself. So yes, I think there's a great connection there, and the more we can learn about how the human experience impacts us on a day-to-day basis, the better humans will we be, and better humans make better business owners.
Yeah, absolutely. Great distinction. You mentioned, speaking of the human experience, that, your family is one of your core values. And, when we look at our home, we live differently in our bedroom versus our office or our kitchen. So one of the things I always love to ask my guests is, what is your favorite room in your home and why?
Yeah, well, I hadn't really thought about that, but I think the first thing that came to mind was probably the kitchen, because I do love to cook and I do love to provide from, there's nothing better than when I've got two adult daughters now, and I'm the youngest of 7 brothers in my family. So I've got 6 older brothers. So I grew up in a large household where food, and being an Italian origin as well, is a central piece of any gathering. So yeah, I think I'm most happy when I'm in the kitchen cooking a meal or preparing a meal for others to come around and enjoy that together. So I think that would stand out as my favorite place in the home.
I love it. I love it. Well, I know we're running out of time here, and I know that our listeners are going to want to stay in contact with you. I'd love for you to share how they can best do that, and to briefly also, you are currently focused on helping business owners with their sales conversion rates. How are you impacting in that realm?
Look, thanks for that, Diane. Look, at the moment, so firstly, people can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I don't think there's too many other Torrin Minutillo, so you'll find me pretty easy. Just plug in that name, and yeah, definitely reach out to me. Send me a message, reference this, and I'd love to have a conversation. I'm always looking to meet new people to understand how, in whatever way I can impact them. That might be a 20-minute conversation, or it could be whatever it needs to be. But yeah, going back to the helping people with sales conversion. So I think as a business coach for the last 3 to 4 years, one of the things that every business owner that I've met wants to improve how they can get better sales conversion, how they can, generally more revenue. And for what I've spent a fair bit of time, pretty much most of this year, so the last 8 to 9 months now, actually coming up 10 months, is focusing on a program that I can help people understand how to better get sales conversion through this whole human connection thing. So what I do is help people understand the emotional side of selling. And the best way to describe it is that if most of us bring a intellectual process to selling, how do we position ourselves better? How do we make our value proposition make the obvious choice for the person? And what I've come to understand is that gets you about 80% of the way if you do it really well. But it's that gap of that last 20%. And the last 20% is, are you making a human connection at an emotional level with your prospect? Now, this is more so if you are in a relationship type business where it's important for not only the person who's buying from you or getting a service from you, but also for you to build some sort of relationship, whether it's in a short term, medium term, or a long term. So I call it high level selling, which is basically attracting high level clients. And when we want to do that, the most important thing for the human that you're trying to connect with is that, do they have an emotional connection with you? And most of this is going unconsciously, because it's about them feeling in a positive state versus a negative state and feeling safe. So it's all driven by neuroscience. And because now, over the last 25 years of neuroscience, we've understood much, much more about how the brain works and how we interact and how the whole neurobiology works. So what I'm doing is bringing that, and I'm calling it the new future of selling, just helping people understand that connection, because I think what I've learned over my 34-year business career is that we tend to intellectualize selling process too much. And there's a whole lot of techniques that we can bring, and I've got like a 4-step process that you can position yourself well to connect with the client. And the idea is that 80% of it will get you certain far, but it's that 20% which is the emotional connection that are going to get you over the line and improve your conversion. And what I'm seeing now with clients that I'm implementing this with, and myself in my own businesses, is that you're shifting your potential, your conversion rate from what is the average, somewhere between 5 and 30%, through to doubling and sometimes tripling that, depending on what level you're starting from. And so the reason why this is so important is not so much just for the extra revenue and the money that you make in your business, but it leads to a whole lot of more confidence in your process, and that spills into other areas of life. So for me, this is the spearhead to help people understand, if they get this right, that then allows them to choose better quality clients, and better quality clients will give you a better business life. So it's a step into a business. If we can get this part fixed for you, we can then help you with other areas of your business life. So this particular area, I've spent, as I said, a lot of time, a lot of research, spoken to a lot of different people about how to pull this together. So it's called high level selling. If anybody wants to know about that, I can share that with them within 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, and put them on a pathway to getting better sales conversion. So yeah, definitely love to have a conversation. I'm still in the exploratory with this. It's going to take another year or so to really get to how do I package it up best so people can take it in and implement that. So love to talk to people about that, Diane, and hopefully we can help some people get better results.
Love it. Love it. So Torrin, as you know, our theme for this season is intentional living. So in what way are you living an intentional life today?
Yeah, it's a lovely question. I love it because it's what it does is brings that self-awareness to understand is how are you doing that? Now, for me, based on everything I've said today and understanding how emotions drives a lot of things that we do, I think for me to build an intentional life is more about really staying in the moment, because we can't live in the future as much as we like to. We can only live in the present moment. That's all we have. So by staying in the present moment and impacting what you can do today to improve whatever it is you're trying to achieve in the future. So the outcome will be in the future, but we can only impact today. So my way of really impacting an intentional life is to really stay present to what you can control today and impact as best you can and keep that narrow focus. I think that is how I'm trying to live my life on a day-to-day basis. And that helps me evolve to be a better version of myself, which then allows me to help other people around me who seek help.
Love it. Well, thank you, Torrin, so much for being with us here today, sharing your wisdom and your journey. It's been a pleasure.
Excellent. Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, Diane.
You got it. And to our listeners out there, what kind of connection have you made as far as what's going on in your human experience, and how is that translated into your business? Is it working, not working? Have you really tapped into those emotions and see what is underneath all of that? If you have questions on that, please reach out to either Torrin or myself. We'd be happy to answer your questions and support you. And until we connect again, live your spa life. Bye for now.